What's going on? What's going on? What's going on? You already know what time it is. This is your boy, Ryan Walker, better known as the historian. We got a hot one for you this evening. We have one of the best college football players of all time, FSU legendary running back and former first round pick by the Miami Dolphins, Mr. Sammie Smith. This man was an absolute terror on the football field. I'm sure he made Coach Prime duck in practice or whatnot. He didn't want none of that smoke. But I'm just teasing. I love Coach Prime. He was a Falcon first, and he did his thing for us. So we're going to always be grateful for Coach Deion Sanders here. And we support these guys. Even though I'm a dog fan, I do support Colorado too. So as long as they ain't playing the dogs. But enough about that. Go ahead and hit that like and that subscribe button for us on YouTube. If you're there, the Birdcage LLC, you already know how we get down. Like and subscribe for us. Also, if you're on Facebook, please hit the StreamYard link and go ahead and comment in that. We're not going to be able to see the comments live today because this is a recorded session. So we definitely apologize about that, but we wanted to still make sure that we brought you another legendary figure. So sit back, relax, enjoy, and come along for the ride because at the end of the day, you already know how we get down. You either get right or you get left. Welcome to the Birdcage. It's official. Sammie Smith is on the perch. It's on like popcorn, baby.
Okay, y'all, this is it.
Hey, you either get right or you get left. You're in the building with the Birdcage on the Perch interview segment. Once again, I'm Ryan, the historian Walker. You already know how we get down. You either get right or you get left. It's official today. So please, please, please hit that like and that subscribe button on YouTube for us and go ahead and pass this off to your family, pass this off to your coworkers, pass this off to your deacons, your pastors, your waitresses, your barbers. Anybody that's a Falcons fan, or if you're not a Falcons fan and you just enjoy great interviews as well, you can check us out because we have some things coming for you. But today we have a special guest, Mr. Sammie Smith. It's just nothing left to be said. I was born in 87. He was definitely knocking folks out back in the day. He actually ran over my big cousin, Samuel Taylor. I'm sorry, big cuz I had to put that out there. You guys played against him back in the day at South Carolina. But he told me a little story about that, but we'll get to that a little later. But first, before we get into anything, I got to bring my guy, Coach Brant, into the building. He always breaks it down, keeps it simple. What's going on, Coach?
Good afternoon. How you doing?
Hey, we're good. You know what? See, we've been fussing about the Falcons running the ball or whatnot. Maybe we can get this man out of retirement and he could get a couple of carries in and do a few things for us, since Cordell Patterson's still hurt right now.
Love to have him. Love to have him.
Most definitely. This man, he was known for his speed and his power. My cousin got to deal with him firsthand when South Carolina played against those guys back in the day. And he talked about it. He said the first person he ran into, because he said, I had a clear shot at going at Sammie Smith, but he said, Jamie Dukes got into my pads. And my cousin still gets mad about that to this day when you mention Jamie Dukes. And he saw him a couple of times in Atlanta back in the day, and Jamie would kind of remind him about it. And he told him, he said, we ain't on the field now. And you know how it goes, how we roughhouse and joke around.
Oh, yeah.
But Mr. Dukes was a former Falcon who opened up holes for our next guest, one of the best to ever do it in the college ranks, and also was very nice in the NFL as well. We got to bring in FSU legend, former first-round draft pick, number 9 overall for the Miami Dolphins, Mr. Sammie Smith. Welcome to the Birdcage, sir. Welcome to On The Perch. How you doing?
Hey, thank you guys for having me, Brian. Appreciate y'all, man. I heard that intro.
Welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you, Brent. Jamie Dukes was my roommate my first year there in college. That was his last year there, so I got to play one season with Jamie, and not just an incredible football player, but an incredible young man at the time, and great leader.
Did you get to go up against him when you were in high school? Because I know he was born in New York, and he's, I know you're a Florida boy, and I know about that Apopka area very well. Did you get to go up against Orlando Evans in school and go against him in high school?
Well, Jamie was a few years older than me, so again, he was my roommate my freshman year. It was his senior year at Florida State, so we played against Evans a few times during my career, and we got the best of them. But unfortunately, Jamie wasn't a part of those teams. But my roommate after him was an Evans grad also, John Hadley. So I had 2 roommates at Florida State that both were Evans grads.
Wow. We definitely are going to get into that, Mr. Smith, and we definitely appreciate you for coming through. My cousin remembers you guys very well. He played for University of South Carolina. His name was Sam Taylor, and he was a linebacker. He got to know Mr. Dukes very well. When you ran, he says he got to meet him when you guys were running your sweep and you took off around the side. He thought he had a shot at you, and he said Jamie cleaned his clock. He said he got up under my pads, and he said he's not a tall guy, and he said he just launched me out of the way.
Hey,
but,
like these, and I think this would go well with Jamie, especially when we played in college. I ain't hard to find. That's what he ain't hard to find. Well, Jamie wasn't hard to find, right?
Oh yeah.
No. he definitely was that for the Falcons when we had him. So it was a pleasure having Mr. Dukes block for us in that 91 season, and even before then, he was definitely a solid player. But speaking of getting the solid, let's go ahead and get started with you, and let's bring up, you're from Apopka, Florida, birth, same place as Warren, same hometown as Warren Sapp, and recently #1 overall pick Jalen Carter out of the Georgia Bulldogs. I have him up behind me. I was hurt that my Falcons didn't take them. I know we have Bijan Robinson, everybody. I know I'm gonna catch flack for that, but I think the Florida boy would have been a little bit better, for our defense. But we understand why he had to get away, and he's up in Philadelphia, and we're wishing him all well. But you're from Apopka, Florida. Could you tell us about the community that you grew up in and what it was like coming up in such a strong community that's in faith and especially football, because y'all produce a lot of players out of the Apopka area, sir?
Yeah, well, Apopka, of course, is a suburb of Orlando. In the little town I was from, I would say suburb of Apopka. I come from a little small town about 9-10 miles from Apopka called Zellwood, and so that's where all of our kids from that area, we all went to high school at Apopka. Warren Sapp lived about 5 miles from Zellwood in a little town called Plymouth. And so a small town community, football runs deep in Apopka. It still does. It always has. They always are competing for state championships, and they always have put a great product out. And the folks around here, they love their football. They love their football. And as you stated, we have had some really good players come out of Apopka. I think we've had a total of, I believe, 5 or 6 first-round draft picks out of there. Being Aaron Jones. Aaron Jones was a teammate of mine, and he was the first-round draft pick that went in 1988, of course. And then I was the second first draft pick in 89 to come out of Apopka. But then we've had, Warren Sapp and Brandon Merriweather that played down at Miami. And then, of course, recently Jalen Carter, who's probably going to end up being the best one to ever come out of there. I think Warren would have some questions about that, but Jalen is a grown man and has an opportunity to have a Hall of Fame career.
Watching him on Monday
night, can't argue with it.
You can ask Ryan. I was like, he's a freak athlete.
When you talk about Jalen Carter, he and Mr. Smith, you mentioned, I think he stepped out for a sec. Oh man, might have lost his signal. But while we're waiting on Mr. Smith to get back,
I started getting a call. Am I still there?
We just see the black screen. Go ahead and hit your camera button because I think it went off. You can come right back in. We're good.
Yeah, I had a call.
We're just waiting on.
I'm here.
Busy man. We see you now, sir.
So, Mr. Smith, let me ask you a question. I know Apopka is there in Central Florida. How close is it, proximity-wise, to where Frostproof is?
I think Frostproof may be about an hour, a little over an hour away, I believe. Okay. Yeah, I've been down to Frostproof some years back. We used to go down there and street race, right? Everybody had their street cars, and Frostproof was one of the places that we used to go down and back in an old orange grove with just a blacktop road, and we do street racing down there.
Right. I was just curious because one of my teammates in college was from Frostproof, and of course Travis Henry's from down there too. So I had a defensive end I played with in college named Calvin Williams, and he was a heck of a ball player.
Okay. Yep. See, now, I got firsthand experience with those Apopka boys. They knocked my high school. I moved from Atlanta down to Jacksonville, Florida. Went to Sandalwood High School. Unfortunately, our mascot is called the rival of the Falcons, the Aints. That was my high school mascot, and unfortunately, we were blue and gold like Georgia Tech. So I couldn't. I had no choice. I was gonna say I'm not sleeping under the bridge. My mama was literally gonna put me out.
I know.
But let me hold on. Let me make sure I clear it up because she is watching. I'm sorry, Mom. You weren't gonna put me out. I'm just making jokes today. But no, we got to play the Apopka Blue Darters my senior year in high school, and there was a kid named Arnold the Train. I'll never forget that. They called him A Train. That was his nickname. And we literally ended up losing that game at the end, and he just started getting stronger as the game went on. And we were able to throw the football. We couldn't run it. There's one thing I'm gonna say about Apopka. They keep defensive linemen, but not just Apopka. You look at the Central Florida area, you had the greatest defensive linemen. I'm sorry, Warren Sapp and Jalen Carter. You had Deacon Jones to come out of Eatonville, Florida, small town. And that man there was nothing but the truth. And I think he's one of the best to ever come out of that Central Florida area. That's just my opinion, but maybe I'm wrong, sir.
He's a Hall of Famer. You can't argue with that. So,
well, you think about.
He is a Hall of Famer, but Apopka and just that Central Florida area, they just have so much great. And I got to give it up. They just so much great football around that area. I was just blessed to be able to. I was living in Northeast Florida, and we got our teams up there, but I was blessed to be able to participate and just experience and understand what those Friday night lights were like playing against teams like that. So, hey, it's just what it is. But speaking of Apopka, you were a three-sport athlete in high school, Mr. Smith. Which sport do you think was your best? Because I remember reading up on you: football, basketball, and track and field. Which was your best sport?
Well, I loved football, and of course, track and field came natural to me. So I enjoyed competing in track and field. It was always one of my favorites. I get to work now with my daughter, who's aspiring to be a track runner at Florida State University. She's a junior, and so I have an extensive track and field background, and so I get to use that now to prayerfully help her. But football was the ticket that was gonna get me to college, and was going to be the sport that I would have the opportunity to play professionally. I was a 225-pound running back, and so I don't know how much faster I would have been able to get as a track athlete, but football definitely was my ticket.
6'2", 225, and you were a 100 meter and 200 meter state champ in 4A, which, ladies and gentlemen, anything 4A and above in the state of Florida is no joke when you talk about sports. I'm telling you that now. Talent is deep. And for you to be a two-time, for you to be a state champ in both of those events, that says a lot about your speed, Mr. Smith. I see why a lot of schools were really, really trying to get you.
Yeah, at that time, that was the largest class in high schools in Florida. We always played in the largest class, being a school in Apopka that pretty much, gets the population of that whole community and a few little surrounding communities that go to school there. So we stayed in the highest classes. I think right now they're 8A, if there is an 8A. But I out of my career after probably one of your favorites. You probably wouldn't. Well, he wouldn't have been your favorite because you didn't get to watch him play, but he was one of my favorites, Herschel Walker, and just a big, fast running back, man, that could break tackles and make the dynamic runs and the long runs, and that's kind of who I modeled my career after in high school. I wanted to be like Herschel Walker.
He broke my Volunteers' heart when he came up as a freshman. Bill Bates still has
almost broke Bill
on his chest. Yeah, I remember.
Well, I was sitting at home on a Saturday morning watching a black and white television, that game you're talking about, and I think I may have been in maybe, 8th grade, 7th or 8th grade, I believe, and I watched that, and I was, from that time that I watched that play, I was sold that he was going to be the best college football player to ever play. And I still think he's probably the best college football player to ever play the game. Herschel Walker was tremendous.
I was I guess I was 7 or 8, and I remember watching that game live too. And I was like, whoa, who's this guy? Never forgot him after that.
Yeah. Yes.
There was another bulldog in that game that you talk about that he ran over Bill Bates, and he later became your teammate, Mr. Smith, my godfather, Clarence K, who played for the Georgia Bulldogs. He literally was the lead blocker on that play.
Yes. Yeah, Clarence was the real deal too. Now Clarence was a playmaker. He did a lot for Georgia football and had a really good NFL career. But I remember watching Clarence K again. Any chance I had to watch Georgia play as a kid growing up, I was glued to the television. So I had a real rich memory and history of watching Georgia football as a kid. I almost went to school there coming out of high school.
I'm glad that you said that. Go ahead, man. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, what schools besides Georgia did you consider besides Florida State?
Well, it came down to Florida State, Georgia, and Michigan. And the common denominator in those three schools, if you think about it, man, were great coaches. Coach Duke, who I thought had a tremendous amount of respect for, and then Coach Schembeckler at Michigan, who at that time I thought was one of the best coaches to coach in college football. But it boiled down to, man, I was, enamored with Florida State University. I had a chance to go to their football camps as a ninth grader and 10th grader and 11th grader. And so I just fell in love with Coach Bowden and the city of Tallahassee. And so I pretty much knew that that's probably where I was going to be going. But it was a tough decision to choose them over Georgia, again, because I had such respect for Herschel Walker, and the running back coach at that time was Mike Cavan. Dickie Clark recruited me there. So you know how important they were. If I can remember those guys from 30-something years ago, almost 40 years now, that were a part of my recruiting process.
Yep.
And what's crazy about that is, you would have been in that backfield tandem, and I got a friend of mine who's a diehard Florida State fan. He always messes with me. He's going to be watching the show, and he's probably looking right now. Yes, one of your favorite running backs was going to be a Bulldog, so you can't sit there and mess with me about, you just talk Georgia. Your favorite back, one of your favorite running backs literally just said he would have been a dog, but as history had it, Bobby Bowden won it, and, I think he went to a great man and a great program, but it would have been nice to see you in that backfield with Lars Tate, Mr. Tim Worley, Keith Henderson, and those guys. It would have been very nice to see you in that backfield with those guys. But,
Ryan,
as fate has it.
And I think
I guess he stepped out for a second.
I'm here. Can you not hear me?
Yes,
we can hear you perfectly.
Yeah, well, Ryan,
we can hear you perfectly.
Ryan, Tim Worley and I came out the same year, and we actually got to know each other on a visit to Florida State. And Tim asked me, like, man, where are you going to sign? Where are you going? And I told him, it looks like I'm going to go to Florida State. And I think that had a lot to do with him choosing to go to Georgia. So we both were highly recruited running backs that year. And neither one of us could make a wrong decision by choosing, from those two schools. And I think we both made great choices, and we both were able to excel at the schools we were at, and, to have an opportunity to live our lifelong dream, which was to be drafted and play in the NFL.
We just love the fact that y'all was whooping on them Gators back in the day.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yes,
hey,
absolutely. Anytime you can beat up on those lizards, it's a good thing.
Well, when I came to Florida State, the Gators had about a 4 or 5 game winning streak on us. So, myself and John and that 85 class, we had work to do, right, to turn that around. But once we turned it around, I think we rattled off maybe 5 or 6 wins in a row against them. So it goes in trends, and when we came there, Florida was a really good program, but they had just went on probation, my freshman year. And so they were rebuilding and having to, come out from up under the probation stuff. And so it gave us an opportunity to really get some great players out of the state to come and play for Florida State.
Right. So I got a question for you, actually, about football once you got to Florida State. So in high school, I know you played against some great athletes being in the area that you're at in Florida, but everybody knows when you go to that next level, when you go to college, there's always that step in every level that you go. What was the biggest adjustment for you when you actually got on the field to acclimate yourself to the college game? What jumped off the screen or the field to you the most that you thought, oh man, I got to step up a little bit?
Well, I think the speed of the game, when you're in high school, you may have, a couple of kids on the field that could even come close to you, running the way I was back then. And so when you go to college now, the defensive linemen are fast and strong. The linebackers are not quite as fast as, running backs, but they're a lot faster. So it's a lot harder to turn the corner on those guys. And so I think just the speed of the athletes in the game, and I believe that transitions even when you go to the next level, because you're getting the cream of the crop, right, in athletes. So it's an adjustment in that phase as an athlete to be able to, stay abreast and connect with the speed of the game.
Yeah, I completely understand what you're saying about that. My first practice in college, I got my eyes opened real fast. So yes, I completely understand what you're saying.
So I'm gonna put out some numbers for you, just to give the audience an idea of if they weren't around during that time, if they're not Florida State fans, but they've heard your name. I want to make sure that we respect what you did on this level that we're talking about right now. When you talk about strides, 2,539 career yards, 3 receiving touchdowns, 15 rushing touchdowns. You finished third of all as a third time. Excuse me. Let me make sure I had a little tongue twisted. You were the third all-time leading rusher at the school at the time when you left. And then outside of just being a top dog as a running back at the school, you won the Metro Conference title and running track in college in the 100 and the 200 meters. Now, you were a well-accomplished college athlete, not a football player. You are an athlete, sir. Difference. Got to put that out there for the fans. It's not just football with this man. This man is an athlete and world class at that. So shout out to your career because those numbers are very impressive. And you were sharing the ball with Amp Lee back in the day.
No, Amp came a little bit after me. I think Amp came a year or so after me.
Okay, no, I'm sorry. It wasn't Amp. Who? I'm trying to remember your backfield, man. I thought it was Amp.
Dexter Carter, and Victor Floyd.
Yep.
And so
I remember hearing Victor Floyd.
Yep, and Dexter Carter. And so, I left school a year early. I actually had another year of eligibility to play at Florida State. But I entered the draft early, and I used to always kid Warwick Dunn about that because I had the single season rushing record for about 7 years until he broke it, 7 or 8 years. And I always kid him because I told him, I said, I didn't play in the first game of the season that year. So I only played, 11 games, I think it was at that time. You had an extra one, and you only broke my record by 20 yards. And so I joke with him a lot about that. And, I look back sometime and you think, man, what if I had stayed another year? Would I have been able to, produce more and, maybe have a 1,600 yard season? But I'm thankful for the time that I was there. And I think I left when the time was for me to leave. And I'm proud of the time that I was at Florida State. And, I believe that records are meant to be broken. And you like to see that happening at your old school because then something's taking place right there within the program.
Right. You were on the I don't know how to say this really. Florida State had always been a solid football program, but I liken your crew that you were with. You all were the building blocks that set the foundation for everything that what people now know as what Florida State did. Because soon after you all came, Warwick Dunn, Charlie Ward, and all the stuff, and they were a very flashy, flamboyant. Looking at it on TV back then, there was no internet or that. A lot of people don't understand that, and that was the national game of the week. And when you got to see them and all the punt returns and the punt blocks and the offense that Coach Bowden ran. It was a special time. I was always enamored by watching what you all did, and y'all put up some really big numbers back then.
Well, we had a lot of fun, and 5 class, we like to think that we were the catalyst to push the team over to the next level. We helped start the 14 years of finishing in the top 5. But I like to give credit. I like to give credit to the classes that were right before us too. The '84 class and the '83 class. Those guys had a foundation that was being built on, and I think that we came and brought some other pieces with myself and Deion Sanders and Odell Higgins, who's still coaching there now. We great offensive lineman, Pat Tomberlin. So we had a nice mix in that '85 class that went on to do real well and to help propel Florida State to become a talked about university and football program and to make it attractive for guys like Warwick Dunn and Derek Brooks and Charlie Ward to want to come be Terrell Buckley to come be a part of that.
Devin Bush.
Devin Bush, all of those guys, all good friends.
Yep.
Yes.
And it's a guy that I want to ask about because he outside of Fred Biletnikoff, being one of your best players, got to put out there for the one, for Mr. Perry Georgia himself, Mr. Warner Robins, Mr. Ron Simmons. A lot of people just
Yes.
know him for his wrestling days, but that man there, God, as a nose tackle, being ranked, fourth in the Heisman, that dude, that was just something different. And he brought a lot of attention to Florida State. And we always laugh and joke about it. And we say, Ron Simmons makes the joke, says, I had to leave the state of Georgia when I signed with Florida State. And ever since Bobby Bowden got him, it seems like South Georgia and Middle Georgia has been a stomping ground for Florida State to get some of the best talent out of the state of Georgia. What do you think the mojo was for Bobby Bowden to be able to get in that area, just like your area around the Central Florida area? He was competing against Coach Howard Schnellenberger, rest in peace as well, with trying to get talent, and Vince Dooley. How was Coach Bowden so convincing with his sales pitch to bring you to Florida State and so many others like Ron Simmons and many others that came under Coach Bowden's tutelage?
Well, he was genuine. I think that once he got in the room with your mom, man, and your dad, they knew that their son was going to be taken care of, that their son was going to be molded, and that their son was going to grow in some attributes that they would need to be able to be competitive in life. And that's one of the things that I embrace more than anything about my time with Coach Bowden is, the man that he exemplified and showed me as to who he was and his character. And it was a coach like that and that attitude and the way that he coached that I think helped me go through difficult times later in life that had nothing to do with football, right? But just the encouragement of him and just modeling how he did things and his faith. He exercised and showed his faith at all times, man. And if you're around that and you have a chance to glean some of that, it will come back up when you need it most. And I can certainly say that that's what he did for me as a coach. Away from the football field, man, he was way more impactful in my life than ever calling a play for me to run.
He was a genuine man. That the times that I got to meet him, I echo everything that you just said. And we talked about that before the show a little bit. He was just himself, and he was infectious the way that he was with people. And I completely understand what you're saying.
Yeah, that's one of the things now that I feel for young athletes and young college football players or college basketball, whatever the case may be, that they don't get a chance to experience a coach like that. You really don't know what you're missing out on. And so those are the kind of coaches that, man, I would love for, my daughter to be able to, run track under, or my son he's grown now, but had he continued to play and go to college, I would have loved for him to been able to play under a coach like Coach Bowden that had those type of values.
Yep. I would love my kid to go somewhere like that. I can't blame you one bit.
And before we get to your draft experience, I want to stay on your Florida State days a little bit because we're going to move around. Now, you just spoke on the experience as a player for Coach Bowden and how he impacted you. What was it like having two guys on the team, Coach Prime, Deion Sanders, Neon Deion, Prime Time, as everybody knows him, and then you had another good friend of yours who made the NFL as well. He was a very solid and very good receiver coming out of Jacksonville, Florida, Mr. Ron Squeak Lewis. As teammates at Florida State, they both didn't just play football. They also played baseball together. What was it like seeing those two guys on and off the field, and then also seeing them in the light as athletes as well?
Well, they were competitors. Anytime an athlete can come to college, right, and not have to focus on one sport, but he's so gifted that he could play, two major sports, man, they're special. And Dion was one of the hardest working guys I've ever been around, as far as trying to, create the best of his craft, right? Putting in the work to be the best that he could be. That's Dion in a nutshell. And then Ronald was the same way. Ronald came there, and we had what I would call, as I look back, a really solid receiving core. The guys that were there before Ronald. Then Ronald came in with 3 other guys that they called him the Fab Four. All right, so he came in having to compete to get on the field, and he didn't miss a beat, man. Ronald came right in and started getting playing time as a freshman, and he did a great job for us. And again, just a hard-working guy, both of those guys. Ronald on the offensive
So can you
side.
give us? Oh, I'm
Yeah, I was
sorry. Go
saying,
ahead. You said Mr. Lewis was on the offensive side.
yeah, I was Ronald on the offensive side and Dion on the defensive side. So one playing cornerback and one playing receiver. So could you imagine the competitiveness of that during the practices and how that made the transition to the game a whole lot smoother and easier? Dion always say you win the game in practice, because we had great players to compete against.
I would have just loved to heard the conversations on the field between them two. The chirping. That exactly where I'm going with that. Here to go back and forth. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's why I was laughing, because I already know.
No. Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, I think the ones that did more of the talking would have been our quarterbacks, because they had to worry about Dion picking the ball off.
Oh yeah.
And then if the receivers didn't run the right route or didn't knock a ball down that should have been knocked down, they're the ones that hurt it the most, the quarterbacks.
Oh yeah.
Now there's a story I heard about. Jamie Dukes actually told a story, and a few other people, they talked about it as well. They were saying you were the fastest guy on the team at one point when you were at Florida State. And they said Coach Prime was a true freshman, didn't know. They say he was still wet behind the ears, but they said just the speed that he had, because he said he raced you and he got you. Is there any truth to that?
Well, Dion never ran track. I tried to get Dion to come out for track and field the whole time we was there. And fortunately, I got him to come out our last year, and be a part of our track team, because I told him it would help him in his combine. It would help him get ready for pro day, by running track. He'd be able to run an amazing 40. Well, Dion didn't even know how to get in the starting blocks because he had never run track. And so I could probably beat Dion, the first few times. But when he learned how to get out of those starting blocks, I couldn't do nothing with him, man. He was just too quick out of the hole. And for a guy to never run track and to come out there and run a 200 meters, can you
wow.
If he had trained for track? Yes. And I was 225 pounds. Dion was probably 175 pounds soaking wet back then.
Well, Daryl, he and Daryl Green at the NFL Roundtable Top 100, where they were talking about cornerbacks and whatnot. Daryl Green laughed and said, this is before, Coach had his surgeries and everything. He was still able to run. Daryl Green said he could have got him, because rumor had it he got Carl Lewis in college, and everybody knows how great of a sprinter Carl Lewis was. But Daryl Green was he was just like Dion, just ridiculously fast.
Oh,
God gifted.
Yeah, I watched Daryl in some of those NFL fastest man contests, and he could run. He could definitely put him down and pick him up and put him down. He was really fast. But Dion didn't know his speed. He's one of those guys, man, that ran as fast as he needed to. Again, I always tell people he had been a track athlete that had worked in track and field and worked on flexibility, worked on learning how to get out of the blocks. If that would have been a part of who he was coming out of high school, there's no telling how fast he could have been. I believe he could have run sub 10, 100 meters, had he been trained to do that. I think he would have been a 9.8 guy.
Wow.
Yeah.
What you got for him, Coach?
Oh wow, that's mind blowing right there. I was going to ask you about some of because I know that was right in the thick of Miami making the rise with Schnellenberger and then transitioning over to the other teams. Talk about some of your rivalries and just how much talent was on the field between the two teams that you went against. Yeah, I mean, it was basically like an NFL on Saturday watching those games.
Well, when we got to Florida State, Miami was the standard, right?
Mm-hmm.
I was a part of the '85 class, Dion and myself. I had teammates. Well, they weren't teammates of mine, but a couple of other guys that were from Apopka that played for the University of Miami, and they were on that team when they won the championship in 1983 under Snellenberg. All right,
Yep.
so when you come in '85, you're trying to reach that standard. They're already competing. They're already, a really, really good program down there. So you got Florida and Florida State really trying to catch up to them. And so we started making strides with that '85 class. And then, the '87 year was, I can remember the game against Miami that year. That's the game that's probably the only game in my college career or any other career that I literally came in after the game was over and sat on my stool and I cried because I couldn't believe we lost that game. We had them 19-3, I believe, at the half, and we let them come back and, win the game. And we had a chance to win the game at the end. We went for 2 points and we could have tied it, and there was no overtime. And maybe we would have been the ones that played for a championship that year had we kicked the extra point. But we all wanted to go for the win. We didn't want a tie game against our arch rival. And so Miami was the gold standard, man, and it will continue to be even after we left. A few of the teams that had the issues with the wide right or wide left, against Miami, but finally they were able to come out from up under it in '93 and get Coach Bowden his first championship. But Miami was a nemesis, man. They had great players.
I blame Danny Cannell. I blame Danny Cannell for one of y'all championship losses. So if he sees this or whatnot, I'm letting you know, Danny. I blame you for some of those losses, buddy. I'm just joking. I like Danny. Danny's all right.
Well, you talk about that '87 team, right? The game I just was talking about that we should have won, right? I had 189 yards rushing against them that game. But when you talk about the athletes who were in that game, they had Michael Irvin, right? They had, I believe, Steve Walsh was the quarterback at that time, who was a first-round draft pick. They had Alonzo Highsmith was their fullback. Melvin Bradden was a great running back that ended up getting hurt that year in a bowl game against Oklahoma, I believe it was. They had Brian and Benny Blades. Benny was a first-round draft pick. And then you look on our side, you had Dion, myself, Leroy Butler, who's a Hall of Famer now, Edgar Bennett, Ronald Lewis. So there was a plethora of talent on that field. I think Jerome Brown was on that team, if I'm not mistaken.
I was going to say their defensive line.
I was going to say Jerome Brown was on that team.
I think Jerome was on that '87 team, and Daniel Stubbs. So they just had tremendous athletes, and we were trying to get to that point, right? We were trying to get the players that would be like that defensive line they had, and so we started getting players like that of that caliber to be able to compete and to have an opportunity to play for national championships. And so we like to feel like we had a lot to do with the starting of that blueprint, and then to carry on, man, for the guys that they start getting after that. Andre Wadsworth all those big defensive linemen that played for him, the cornerbacks, the linebackers that came, Marvin Jones. Man, it was just a force to be reckoned with. After we left
And
there, I would say that the 90s, man, the 90s was
mhm.
Florida State time.
Derek Brooks.
Yes, it was.
Derek Brooks, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what's funny, Marvin Jones. So Marvin Jones, who you mentioned, his son plays at University of Georgia right now. He's an edge
Yes,
rusher, and the funny thing
yes.
is, he look like he's built just like his dad. He just is still trying to figure out the game, and that's another, like you said, another kid that comes out of that Florida area. And I'll be honest with you, I was nervous because we all thought he was going to go to Florida State, but he ended up making his own path. But hands down, if Marvin Jones is on that team right now that you guys have, with that defense that y'all have, that would be a problem. That would be a serious problem because no lie, the Florida State Seminoles look good this year. And after that fight that they had in Clemson Saturday, that I can honestly say that won me over because that showed you guys got a lot of resolve and you guys are gonna be dangerous for years to come under Mike Norvell.
Yeah, I was at Clemson. I was there this weekend, and man, it was a hot game, and they had us on pins and needles. But I was sure glad they were able to pull it out. I just was listening to you when you think about Florida, right?
Mm-hmm.
Think about the players that I just mentioned that were at Miami, right, and the players that I mentioned that were at Florida State. Where do you think the
Mm-hmm.
majority of those names came from? They were all Florida
A lot of
boys.
those boys came from Central Florida. A lot of those boys came from Central Florida. I know the Miami guys had the South Florida mapped off, even though you guys
Yeah,
got them, and also Duval County out of Jacksonville.
yeah. So when you think about that, man, that's how Florida and Florida State and the University of Miami were good during that time because they kept all of those great players in state. We had great football there. Now you've got players that are leaving and going to Alabama and going to Georgia, like Jalen Carter ends up at Georgia, and there's plenty of them, I'm sure, down in from Florida that have played for Alabama during their run. And
Mm-hmm.
so we got to get back. We got to get back to trying to keep those kids in Florida, right? And then being able to pick off a few from your territory of Georgia.
Y'all used to poach Thomasville, Georgia,
Well,
off a lot. That was the
Yeah.
mini NFL right there.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Charlie Ward's hometown and William
Yeah.
Andrews.
Uh-huh. Yep.
But getting to it, speaking of NFL, thank you, Coach. You helped me transition to the next part of the interview. Now, we talked about you from your Apopka Blue Darter days to your FSU days. You became a first-round draft pick once you left after your junior year for the Miami Dolphins, and you were picked number 9. And you go from one legendary coach to another legendary coach in Don Shula. Talk about what that experience was like with being a first-round pick, getting to Miami, playing with Don Shula, and then you're in the same huddle with Dan Marino and Chris, and it's just well, and the Clayton guy. I'm sorry, and the Marks brothers. Excuse me. Make sure I get that right. The Marks brothers. What was that experience like, Mr. Smith?
Well, growing up in Florida, right? You watched the Florida football teams. Like I was a fan of Miami. I was a fan of the Bucks, because those were our home teams, and so you kind of knew some of the history, and I knew how important it was to have an opportunity to be on a team that would compete, hopefully, to be in playoffs and try to make it to a Super Bowl. And that's where Miami was. They had gone in '83, I believe it was. Maybe that was Dan's first year there with the team. And so you come to a team like that with a legendary coach, with an up and coming Hall of Fame caliber quarterback, with great receivers. We were rebuilding the offensive line, and then you bring in the running back. And so my aspirations was to go there, man, and to help the team become a playoff team and to prayerfully be able to get to the Super Bowl. Now, we did make the playoffs a couple of years while I was there, but Buffalo was our nemesis at that time. If you remember Buffalo, well, you wouldn't remember because you weren't even born, I don't think, then. But Buffalo,
No, I was
that's during
born in
that era.
'87. I remember watching Buffalo lose all 4 of
Yeah,
those Super Bowls.
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
Buffalo was when they went. That was our nemesis, and unfortunately, like I said, the career I wanted to have, it didn't transpire. But man, I had some great memories, and to be able to play for a legendary football coach, and to be able to play with Dan Marino and the Marx brothers, and Mark Higgs, who's still a good friend of mine, and Farrell Edmonds.
Kentucky boy.
Louis Oliver was from Florida, the University of
Yep.
Florida. So we both were first round picks that year. We competed against each other in college, and then we got a chance to be teammates at Miami. So it was a special time, really special time.
So now you talk about that being a special time, and like I said, you got to
Are
a
you still
place
there,
where a lot
Mr.
of.
Smith?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you stepped out, Brand. I apologize.
Are you still there?
Go ahead, Brent.
No, I was just saying. Mark Higgs, I believe he came out of Kentucky, didn't he?
He did. He did.
Yeah.
Yep.
Played with Mark Logan. He actually was a teammate of Freddie Maggart, who Freddie coached me my senior year. Going back some of the ties to Kentucky. That's the reason I knew that. So
we had Mark Logan also from Kentucky. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So I have to ask the question. Me
Sure.
being the offensive guy, and when I coached, I called plays and whatnot. In your opinion, who is the most impressive? I didn't say the best because that's a question that can't be answered. Who's the most impressive quarterback that you've ever been around on the field?
Well, it's really a toss-up, man, because they had different qualities, right?
Mm-hmm.
Marino had a release that was so quick, and he was so accurate, right? This was a dynamic quarterback in his strengths, right? But then you go and you take in the John Elway, right?
Exactly.
And you watch that has the same ability, in my opinion, throwing the ball. I don't know that he had as quick a release as Dan, but he was accurate. And then you add to that this guy can run, right?
Yep.
And so, it's a toss-up, man, between the two of those guys. They both were tremendous football players, and I got a great deal of respect for them both. Only difference is John got a chance to win a couple of Super Bowls, and Dan only got.
We're not going to talk about one of them. We're not going to talk about one of them.
Yeah. Don't mention one of them. We are Falcons fans, and we still look. That's like pulling up an old scab. Talking about your old teammate John Elway.
I'm just glad we got there, though. Yeah. So.
Yes.
But I saw Dan Marino come into Knoxville, Neyland Stadium. I remember it come down there and light my balls up like a Christmas tree when I was a little kid. So I started following him, and then next thing you know, he's in the NFL, and man, he was just, his arm talent was second to none in my opinion. Just watching him with the release, he could literally flip his wrist and the ball was gone. It was just unbelievable.
Yes, absolutely. Great guys, man. Great receivers too. As I think about the Marx brothers in Miami, we had Mark Jackson and Denver, and geez, I can't remember the Vance Johnson in Denver too. So, and then Ricky Nattil. Yeah, Ricky Nattil, who was a
Florida Gator.
So they had in this receiving core there too.
When they the three. So let me see. Washington had the posse back in the day. The Redskins had the posse. You had the Marx brothers in Miami. Those were the three amigos out there in Denver, right?
Yes.
Okay, I wanted to make sure I had that right because I know my godfather was on that team at '84 when he got out of Georgia, and unfortunately, Dan Marino lit those guys up in that national championship game in that Sugar Bowl. And I know from what my aunt was telling me when they used to date back when my aunt and my godfather dated before they split. She was like, she was a cheerleader in the track star at Georgia. She said when he scored she said when Clarence scored that touchdown, we thought that game was over with. And she said we
Yes.
were gonna party on Bourbon Street. She said Dan Marino said, "Nah, I'm gonna go ahead and change that." And that's when he
I,
threw that pass to John Brown at the end of the game and broke all the Dog Nation's heart. And what's funny is when they saw each other in the NFL, you say, "Yeah, your Godfather will remind him of that, saying I got drunk that night and you cost me a ring because of that throw of yours." And he said, "I'm gonna cost you a playoff spot too." So it was just funny banter, as you would say, with that. But now we've gotten to the NFL part of the life. I know it's a part of, like you say you're open book, so I'll go ahead and ask you. When things started not to go right with your football career, once you retired, you got into a little trouble legally, and you had to cool your heels for a little while. Um, when you had to sit down and you had to manage these tragedies of losing a son at one point in life and then having to go to prison, what did you turn to when it came to whether it was it your faith, your religion, the lessons that Coach Bowden taught you? What really got you through those tough times and got you to a place to where you were able to say, you know what, this isn't gonna beat me. Once I do what I need to do, I'm gonna rebound and I'm gonna get back on my feet and do the right thing, and I'm gonna be a success. What got you through those tough times, Mr. Smith?
I think it was a collaboration of all of the things you just mentioned. I could never forget the first night I was arrested, right? And I sat in that cell, and I knew right away that, man, I had made a terrible choice to get involved in the involvement I had with some friends that I grew up with, and so I believe that first night I got on my knees and I asked God for forgiveness, right? And I said to God that I was sorry for the choice and how I had not been frugal with all the abilities and things that He had blessed me with. And I made it a point that night to understand and realize that I wasn't going to be able to get through that all without Him, right? And so between accepting my responsibility and knowing that, believing that God's word, that there would not be put more on me than I could handle with Him. So I felt like going into that I would come out of that better. That I had people surrounding me, my family, my mom and my dad, that were supportive. And then when I think about the people in my life, like Coach Bowden and friends and stuff that had been believers, friends that had been encouragers that wouldn't look at that episode of my life and turn their back on me, but would be encouraging. And that all were the coaches from Florida State, my high school coach, alumni that I knew from Florida State that are still great friends of mine today. So just surrounding myself with the people that God had placed in my life and in my sphere of influence, it came back to be really beneficial to me. I share this with folks sometimes, and can you picture in 1998, I'm in federal prison, and I'm in Edgefield, South Carolina, right? And I'm at a federal prison camp. And over the loudspeaker, I hear Sammie Smith come to the warden's office, right? I'm out walking, get some exercise, and I hear it again, Sammie Smith come to the warden's office. And I'm like, man, why are they calling me to the warden's office, right? So I go there, and who's on the phone? Where does this happen at, right? They got my coach that recruited me, Jim Gladden at Florida State, who was still coaching there, and Coach Bowden in the background. And the warden's telling me that they want me to record a message to the 98 football team at FSU. Would I do that, right? And that was during the time where it was Peter Warwick and those guys, and there was some kind of little scandal going on
Vernon
where
Coles.
Steve Spurrier started calling FSU Free Shoes University, right? And so I
Yep.
agreed to record a video, and I did that from federal prison, right? Encouraging these guys, encouraging that team, and That video went over really well, but who you think got blessed the most from that?
You.
I did, because
Absolutely.
I left recording that video, right, at a time in my life where people could have looked and said, man, you know, you have no value. He's in prison, right? But Coach Bowden never knew this until I told him that you don't know what that did for me to know that, man, I had value right where I was at, right? That I could still impact people's lives from right where I was at. If I would surrender and allow God to use the predicament that I was in to be a benefit to others. And so I say that to say, man, it's things like that that were able to help me navigate and to know that on the other side of that, that I could be a bright, shining light if I allow God to use me. And that's what I've done.
Well, bless you. God never makes mistakes. That's one thing for sure.
Yeah, I
He
always think
never makes mistakes.
yeah, it's how you respond, you
And
know,
you
and
know exactly. And the problem with a lot of people now, when you talk about a lot of the young athletes and a lot of these guys now, you know, you're making mistakes, but a lot of it's never our fault. It's never this. No one takes accountability for their mistakes, or no one wants to suffer the consequences once you already know the choices of your actions. And as my grandmother would always tell me, she said, you know the red flags before. She said red flags don't turn green. What that means is anytime that you know your choices or know things that you're getting ready to get into that's getting ready to mess up your life, understand this. When you make that choice, you fall by yourself. Your friends are not going to be there to help you, and you're going to have a lot of family that turn on you too. So don't put yourself in that situation. And, you know, but at the end of the day, we all fall short and we all make mistakes, and we're all not perfect at all. And, you know,
Exactly.
God always talks about forgiving. God always talks about forgiveness. I know we don't get too heavy into it, but you know, the last time we really opened up, Terrence Mathis was on our show, and we were speaking about a lot of the things spiritually. And when you said you helped a lot of young men and a lot of young athletes out, you know, that means a lot, because it's so many of these young athletes that need individuals that have been there, that have done that, that have been great athletes, but they fall into the wayside, and they need individuals such as yourself to help get them through, because they think they're invincible. You know, just like a regular young cat. At one point,
yes.
I thought I was. I made some mistakes in my life, but you know, it's like you said, it's not how you fall, it's how you get up and you bounce back from that. Do you learn? Do you change your patterns? Do you change your ways? And you know, you talked about it, about changing your ways. Let's go ahead and get to, you know, I'll get to it like this. You were in a position later in life to help out a lot of young athletes. You were with Hugh Freeze down in Ole Miss, and with Coach Freeze, you were able to work with a lot of young athletes around the school of Ole Miss. Um, and you were mentoring a lot of people and trying to prevent them from going down and making bad choices. What did you get out of being able to mentor those young folks, or at least try to help those not make the same choices you made, or avoid some of the pitfalls that you saw others that were around you make?
Well, I think when you put in that environment, Ryan, you just want to be transparent. I had 1 year with Coach Freeze, and then I had 3 years with the succeeding coach after him, Matt Luke, and then I just 3 years with Coach
Mm-hmm.
with Lane Kiffin. So I did a total of 7 years there before I felt compelled to come back home to Florida. But man, you just want to be available, right? Coach Bowden, um, I inquired of him prior to me taking that role at Ole Miss, and just wanted to know his thoughts about me, you know, leaving and going there to work in that role. And he said something to me that was profound, right? He said, Sammie, God's not concerned with your ability, right? Your ability to go there and impact lives. What God is concerned with is your availability. where you make yourself available. So
he wants you to open that door. Absolutely. Answer the door.
That's what I set out to do, man. Is just to be available for the young men and the coaches that were there, to be transparent, for my life to be an open book, right? The mistakes and the difficulty that I had and choices I had made, and you just want to encourage them. And so when you're walking in your purpose and you're doing what you're supposed to do and what God's calling you to do, it's amazing the other doors that you don't even see that are opening, right? So I went there, and you all know I left school a year early to turn pro. Well, I never went back and finished my degree, and I noticed after being there for a couple of years that one of my main talking points to the football, majority of you guys aren't going to make it to the NFL.
He's going to come back. We lost him. I think he ended up having a phone call.
Y'all can't hear me?
Mr. Smith, we lost you for a second. We had lost you for a second. You were talking about one of your main missions with the football players, and then it cut out.
Yeah, one of my main, talking points or my main mission with those guys was to understand that the majority of them not going to play professional football, right? But everyone that's in there has an opportunity to get a degree, and to get a degree in something that they enjoy doing. Well, I started getting convicted because I left college a year early to turn pro, and I never went back and got my degree. So in the midst of that, I told the team and the coaches in a team meeting that I was going to go back to school, right? I hadn't been to college in 31 years. But I looked into getting back enrolled in school, and I had to do 2 full semesters, 15 hours each semester. And I was able to do that and make straight A's in all of those classes that I had to take. And I graduated from Ole Miss. All right. And so that was practicing what I preach, right? That is never too late. So I encouraged my wife to go to school. So now I got a wife that during our time there has gone to college and got her BS and master's degree in social work, right? And I got a son that left there that has a mechanical engineering degree. So you go there by being obedient. You go to just do what God has asked you to do. And then you just look at the blessings that come out of it, stuff you weren't even thinking about. So I got a University of Mississippi legacy behind me now. Even though I'm
so yes, can we say it? Can we say it, Mr. Smith, please? Can we just say it? You are a Florida State football legend, but guess what? He is SEC property officially with that degree. So Danny Cannell, eat your heart out.
You know what I tell?
I always like to mess with him and whatnot. But
Brian, I bleed garnet and gold, right? But when I came back home, and you see right now I got some Ole Miss gear on, right? And so when I come home and I'm wearing my old stuff, all my Seminole fans will ask me like, "Well, man, where's your Seminole stuff? Why you got that Ole Miss stuff on?" I say, "Hey, look, I'm a rebel nose, right? I say I love the Seminoles, but man, I graduated from Ole Miss, so I got dual loyalty, right? And I'm gonna rep both of them."
Right.
And in other words, me and you gonna be doing some trash talking this year because Ole Miss got to play Georgia this year.
Yeah, I'm thinking about going to that game this year. Y'all look a little down too now.
I mean, but we have a lot of injuries right now. Tennessee probably might sneak us if we go into Knoxville tiptoeing. Brent would enjoy that. But
my balls never got off the bus in Gainesville 2 weeks ago. So I mean,
I was pretty disappointed with the way my Rebels went to Tuscaloosa this weekend too.
Yeah. Well,
and
you always have next week.
Well,
so
but on another so hey Ryan, on another tip, if Florida State keep doing what they doing and you keep doing what y'all doing at Georgia, we might butt heads that way too now.
I'm gonna be honest with you. I wouldn't mind that. I got family and I got friends, who are Florida State fans. We And there's no hate. And what's funny is there's no hate between FSU and Georgia. It's just when we play against each other, there's no love, but it's no hate there. Like
Oh yeah.
like one thing I can say, we both all well, I can say all three of us on this panel, we all hate Florida. Every
Oh
last one
Yes.
of us.
Oh yeah.
So so
yeah. We
that's why I said, but but speaking of that, we got to promote something today. We're gonna talk about your new book. We've been promoting these schools and promoting, talking football. Let's talk about something that's very precious and something that's dear that's getting ready to come out soon. I want fans to be on the lookout for it. Your new book, 181211018. My number was my name. I'm sorry, excuse me. My number was, but my name was redeemed. And this was done with Tim Enoch, correct?
Yes, yes. It was a book that
Okay.
really had been building up inside of me really for about 15 years or more. I started kind of writing some stuff 15 years ago, and then I hit the little writer's block, right? And I just put it to the side, and I'm glad I did, because I know God's timing is always the proper timing, right? The right timing. And so had I tried to do that book back then, I wouldn't have the things that are in there now. And so it was a labor of love, man. I was able to share some stories in that book of, some of the things we've talked about, the prison episode, losing a son to SIDS and what that was like. That number, the name of that book, 181211018, was the Federal Bureau of Prisons number that was assigned to me when I got in that trouble and went to prison, right? And so the book is really just to say that, man, we're not defined by a number. I'm not defined by number 33, which I wore at Florida State and Miami. I'm defined by who God says I am, right? And by the abilities that he's put inside of me, and by being able to be obedient and allowing him to use me. Then that's how I'm defined. I'm not defined by any mistakes that I've made, right? I'm defined by who I serve and how I live my life in the way that I want to do it to please God and not to please any other people. And so I believe that the book is encouraging everybody that's bought it, and that I'm getting responses from that are sending me texts and notes on via email, or just telling me that they found themselves somewhere in that book, and they thanked me for it because they said it was really encouraging and it helped to give them hope. And I think at the end of each chapter in there is an opportunity for you to receive hope, and so that's what it's all about, man. A book that really just tells some story, but at the end of it is an encouraging read to kind of prick your mind and to get you headed in the right direction and desiring to have a relationship with Christ.
I'm going to check that out for sure.
Well, we definitely appreciate it. And
Yeah.
now we're gonna get down to this last little bit because we're running out of time. Now your Dolphins put a shellacking on your other team that you played for, the Denver Broncos. 70 points. They should be ashamed of themselves getting whooped like that. But we don't mind as Falcon fans because both of us don't like Sean Payton. None of us,
At all.
nobody likes Sean Payton in the Falcon Nation at all. So it couldn't have happened to a better guy. But honestly though, from your standpoint as an offensive player, we're gonna speak on both sides of it. Now, on the Miami side, you saw how electric that offense can be with Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, Mostert in the backfield. And Tua Tagovailoa, once he's healthy and you can see what he can do operating against one of the worst teams in the league right now. But still, when you see that offense buzzing the way that it does it give you a little bit of memories of seeing what those offenses were, those pass-heavy offenses were under Don Shula with Dan Marino, just how spread out it was?
Man, when I look at it, honestly, they're so talented, right? And I think about, I forget what they used to call Kurt Warner and that crew, when they had
Greatest show on turf.
Greatest show on turf.
It reminds me of that, man. They've got explosive receivers, right? They've got a dynamic quarterback that's healthy and playing, I think, at the top of his game right now. They've got a mixture of running backs, right? Mosher and the kid from Texas A&M, the A-Chain kid. And so, we talked about it earlier when we first started this. I think Coach Brett asked me what was the difference, moving from one league to another, and I talked about speed. Well, man, that's one of the things that they got plenty of speed, and I don't think that they were even really trying to score like that, man. But Denver just couldn't do anything with them. They couldn't stop them, and it was a lopsided game, and I really hope that Denver will be able to rebound from that and not let that carry on to the next week and the week after that. They'll right the ship. Because I don't like to see him looking that bad.
And on the Denver side of things, what do you think needs to be done to fix that team, but especially the offense? You have a guy like Russell Wilson, who's a decorated quarterback around the league. I'm not gonna trash him because he had that Seattle franchise going, but now that he took the money and he's gone to Denver, offensive line's not good. They can't protect him. The running game is not there. And Denver is known for two things: running the football and being able to protect quarterbacks. You don't see that now. The Denver staple is gone. Why do you think that Denver has gone away from its roots?
Well, you just answered that for me. I mean, if you can't run the ball, right, you can't protect the quarterback, you can't win games. And so I think they're undergoing a really, a major rebuild now. They've got to get athletes in there, man. They've got to get some really good receivers. I know that they got the kid from Alabama. I don't even know how he's playing, Judy, because I hadn't really watched their team, but you hit it on the head, man. If you ain't got an offensive line that can block for the running backs and that can protect the quarterback, right, and a dynamic running back and some good receivers, you're not going to be able to accomplish anything. And then for a defense, man, to let 70 points get scoring on them. And again, I didn't watch the game or all the highlights, so I don't know how all the points were scored. But that looks to me like an overall, man, they got to redo that whole team. They got to bring in it's a rebuild. It's a total rebuild.
And how did Shannon Sharp say the other day, Brant, on First Take? He said, "You got the nerve to get a 50-piece hung on your head with a side with 20 extra flats on the side." That was just awful. But
that's rough.
Shannon was there when I
but
played with Denver. Rookie when I played with Denver.
Yeah.
He's always been the funny guy in the group. Always.
Hey, I have one question. I have one question I want to ask you, and it still has to do with the NFL. Who is, in your opinion, the most dominant defensive player that you ever played against?
Man, that's a tough one, man. I mean, I played against Derek Thomas, and as a running back, you got to block sometimes.
Yep.
He was an amazing. There's no telling how many sacks he would have had he not passed.
Right.
Wow.
Bruce. Bruce there at Buffalo, man, he was the real deal. So there's just a plethora of guys, man. They were all great football players. But if I had to pick two, I would say those two as an offensive player were the most, havoc wrecking guys on the defensive side that I ever played against.
Gotcha. Thank you.
So
he didn't even
mention your Tennessee Volunteers.
Reggie, you played. You're a little bit older than I am, but it was a whole different era of football back then than it is nowadays. You can't touch people nowadays like they used to. People tried to hurt you back then.
Oh, absolutely.
It was brutal.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Reggie White and LT. I mean, there's a whole bunch of people that back then.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yes.
This is
Now,
just
we
legends.
LT one time that I recall. I think we may have played LT my rookie year, but I had to play those other guys, every year a couple of times. So of course, those were the most dominant guys that I had to play against on the defensive side. And Buffalo was loaded, man. They had Cornelius Bennett, so they were just loaded.
Biscuit.
Yep.
Yes, Biscuit. Mm-hmm.
And that's a name that doesn't get talked about much. And we had him in Atlanta during, unfortunately when we lost our Super Bowl, but we had him for a couple of years. And to me, I feel like Cornelius Bennett has Hall of Fame numbers, Hall of Fame player, but does not get the credit that he should, because he was on that line with Bruce Smith, and then he had I forget the guy's name. He was his linebacker. God forgive me for that.
Yeah.
Ben Talley.
Daryl Talley. He had Daryl Talley. He had Daryl Talley on the other side of it.
Yep.
Yeah, Talley. So he had Daryl Talley.
Ben Talley was the Tennessee ball that played for the Falcons. Yeah.
Yes.
He's from Griffin, Georgia. I know Ben.
And Daryl Talley came out of West Virginia. He was a West Virginia guy. So, and I sit back and look at that, and then he moves to Atlanta, and then you have Chuck Smith, you have Clay Matthews playing for Atlanta at that time. Jesse Tuggle, the Hammer, was there at that time. And I still find it very, for Cornelius Bennett, everywhere he's gone, he stood out, but he stood in the shadow of somebody. And I feel like he's an underappreciated defensive lineman as well. So that was defensive lineman and outside linebacker. So I feel like that's a guy that should be getting more flowers than anything.
You realize we just talked about two Alabama guys, right? Derek Thomas.
I know.
Unfortunately, I hate to say that, but they've been putting out linebackers since Leroy Jordan, and even before when Bear Bryant was playing.
Yes.
So as much as I can't stand Bama, Bama, Penn State, and USC. That's like those are, and now Georgia's starting to come into the mix, but we don't have a huge tradition like they do, and neither does Miami. But Florida State's put out a lot of great linebackers too. So I just feel like Penn State, Ohio State, and that pained me to say that. That's in Alabama. That's linebacker U, because they have traditionally put out great linebackers in the NFL.
Yes, they have.
So
yes, they have. Yep.
But we thank you for coming on to the show today, Mr. Smith. I'm gonna link up with you in a little bit, get some information from you, so I can make sure I get you this background that you see on the poster. Going to have that to you as a gift to say thank you for coming through to the Birdcage today, the On The Perch segment. We definitely appreciate it.
I appreciate you guys, man.
And
y'all will have a great and successful podcast, that y'all will have great people on here to share, and I'm gonna be tuning in. So I got to make sure I follow you guys and be able to sometime.
Thank you for coming on, and God bless you, Mr. Smith, for what you're doing now. Thank you.
God bless you guys. Thank you.
Most
you,
definitely.
Ryan.
So we thank you for coming on. Yes, sir.
Okay. We'll see you guys.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Smith. So, Brent, even though we had some slight technical difficulties today, I gotta admit that was kind of fun talking to a legendary college running back who, he had a solid, he was decent in the NFL, but didn't get the breaks he wanted at that time. But for him to turn everything around and become successful, get a degree, is a story. He didn't cry about spilt milk. Man made the best of all of his opportunities. How do you feel? We should look at this as not just as fans of football, but just fans of life.
And like what he was saying, he's doing what he was called to do, and I'm not. You have to answer that door when God knocks, and He put him there for a reason. So He didn't make mistakes. And look at what he has now. I mean, it's wonderful what he's doing. So all the people he's touching. So good for him.
Most definitely. We want to thank everybody for coming out, taking a look. I know we went a little longer than expected, but this was just one of those episodes where we had to get this information out, and just to have a great guy, overall guy, Mr. Sammie Smith, to come through and spend time with us. We definitely appreciate it. We're gonna see you guys tomorrow night at 8 p.m. We're actually gonna talk about the Jags and the Falcons over across the pond for Sunday. We're going to talk about the matchups. We're going to talk about what's going to happen and how we're going to get everything squared away to get back on track, because last Sunday was just atrocious. Let's get back on track. Let's pick up the win, and let's get this season right. What do you think, Brant?
Yeah, we threw that tape away. The VCR chewed up the tape. We're good. Start over. Hey, let's break it down into quarters. Let's break it down into quarters. 4 games, we come out 3-1. We're taking the Bobby Cox mentality. Win the series. Win every series. The next 4 games, let's come out 3-1 or 4-0. Let's just keep doing that until we get to the end. It'll sort itself out.
Agreed. And shout out to the Atlanta Braves for that comeback win that they had last night when they were literally on the ropes. Beautiful comeback win. That's how you come back and win games. Heart of a champion. Hopefully the Falcons are going to take notes of that, so we're not playing from behind. But if you do play from behind, that is how you play from behind. So once again, my name is Ryan Walker, the historian. Got my guy, Coach Brant, in the building. We thank you for coming on to the show, and we definitely will see you tomorrow night at 8 p.m. You guys be safe, be blessed. We love you, and we can't wait to break this thing down tomorrow. So y'all be easy. Peace.